Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Friends, family in Christ, thank you. A lot to get to today with John Haller. Watch his prophecy updates at the FBC YouTube channel. Check those out. But before we do, it's our fundraising campaign. We do this twice a year, and we would just want to thank some people that have gotten us going and keep us going, meaning you give monthly, automatically in some cases, but thank you to the monthly donors. And then I do have some other information to tell you a little later in the podcast. But I want to thank Alita from Apple Valley, California, Nathan from Green Bay, Wisconsin, Wendy from Utica, Michigan, Doug from Wisconsin, Carol from Madisonville, Tennessee, Bud from Fairborn, Ohio, Pamela from Traverse City, Michigan, Michael from Grand Rapids, Michigan, Belinda from Winterville, North Carolina, Sigri from Brainerd, Minnesota, Carol from Denmark, John and Rachel from Cody, Wyoming, Jean from Manitowoc, Wisconsin, Kathleen, our dear friend from Murrieta, California, Stefan from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Anne from Gilbert, South Carolina, Cheryl, Forest Lake, Minnesota, Maria from Los Angeles, California, Janet from Neenah, Wisconsin, Nancy from Sherwood, Mike from Oshkosh, and Laura from De Pere, Wisconsin. Thank you for being monthly donors. That keeps us going. We really appreciate it. All right, John Haller, our guest today. Let's jump right into this, John. But I want to get your take. I haven't talked to you since the results and the outcome of the presidential election. But before we do that, John, you sent me a text last night. We were talking about what we're going to discuss today, and you said, let's get it done before the nukes fly. People get an insight into our text back and forth. I thought that was interesting. I know you're referring to Russia. Speak to that before we talk about the election outcome.
So with the war in Ukraine, Russia's been pretty specific. If I wanted to describe it in a pejorative term, and since I don't have to go see Putin anytime, I guess I can do that. But, Russia's always whining about the fact that, well, we invaded a country, we've been decimating a country, and we're getting help from North Korea, we're getting help from Iran. But Ukrainians, don't you dare get help from anybody else. And so a number of countries, the United States, I believe France, and the UK have given missiles to the Ukrainians. For a long time, they've not been allowed to use those in attacks on Russian territory. They're a little bit longer range. For example, we gave them some missiles that have a range of about 190 miles. And Russia is the biggest country on the planet, so it's not very far into Russia, but Russia does have some sensitive installations there. So Russia has said, listen, they've always said we have this nuclear doctrine and we won't use nuclear weapons first. That nuclear weapon, their nuclear doctrine has been changing over time. And 2 days ago, I don't know when this is playing, on November 19th, they changed that doctrine to say, if we feel threatened with attacks on our territory, we will make first use of nuclear weapons. So they've been rolling out some nuclear missiles, other types of things. I've also heard through intelligence sources that some of their leadership has been taken to underground bunkers, and people are convinced that they're going to nuke the United States any minute because they're upset and they're ticked off. Some of us don't. I'm just not sure. I don't know. They may or may not do that, but the world is probably at a very tense stage right now. I think the atomic scientists they're always saying that it's 5 minutes to midnight. I think they're up to 90 seconds to midnight for doomsday. They might have upped that another 30 seconds over the last, in the last couple of weeks. So it's a very delicate situation. Ukraine did use U.S. missiles, and they did use probably a little bit missiles called the Shadows missiles from the UK in attacks in the last 24 hours. And it was interesting. Biden said, yeah, go ahead. You can use our missiles. And they used them in, I think, in like 45 minutes. They made attacks on Russian territory. So things are, President-elect Trump is out there saying, hey, wait till I get in office. We'll get this thing resolved. But it almost seems like the outgoing administration is trying to bake in a cake of world war before Trump takes office. That's almost what it seems like.
Yes, January 20 seems like a long ways off right now with the people in power now, and it's not Biden, the people behind Biden. But we've had Mondo Gonzalez on, Brandon Holthouse, and others that have talked about Benjamin Netanyahu's reaction to Donald Trump winning the election. What we haven't talked about, John, is Russia and China. Let's start with Russia, since you mentioned we're talking about nukes and how they're reacting to Ukraine. What do you think? Just what can you tell us about how Putin might be understanding the election results in America, how that affects him?
I think that the thing is sort of a general world reaction to the election of Trump is that Trump is viewed across the world as kind of volatile, unpredictable, and, changing from moment to moment in what he's thinking, which I think is probably an accurate assessment. And in certain parts of the world, like the Arab world, that really gives them the impression that the United States may be the strong horse again. Now, I don't know how capable our military is, and I think we're going to talk about an article from Foreign Affairs here in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But so I think Putin and Xi, it's going to be one of two things. They're either going to hold off because they don't know how Trump would react when he comes into office on January 20th. But then again, they may say, we better do what we want to do to bake our own cake on how the world is organized before Trump comes into office. So it's going to be a very volatile couple of months here before Trump takes office.
Agreed. Just be ready, Christians. Be praying.
That's right. Yeah.
So, John, you sent me another article from the International Criminal Court that arrest warrants have been issued for Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Gallant. That was breaking as of a couple days ago, but tell us about that and how that relates to what we're discussing today.
Well, look, I think that it's clear that what we're seeing in the world is a epidemic of anti-Semitism. And by the way, it's very distressing to see this coming from people that a lot of people on the conservative, right-wing political spectrum, that Christians listen to have become these rabid anti-Semites. It's very, very troubling to me. But what you're seeing it on the world scale. So recently the UN Security Council had a resolution presented to it that would say that you need to do a ceasefire in Gaza and then talk about the hostages. The United States was the only member of the UN Security Council. There are 15, 5 permanent and then 10 rotating members. Of the 15 members of the Security Council, the United States was the only one to vote no. Now, because the United States voted no, the Security Council resolution can't go any further. But if you remember back during the Obama administration, there was a resolution that it said Israel essentially needed to abandon all lands from the 1949 armistice lines, and give them to the Palestinian people for a country, a state, the strategically important high ground, give back the Golan Heights, give back everything, and then give back at least half of the old city of Jerusalem to the Palestinians, and they would be able to establish their capital there. So the capital of the Palestinians would be included in the area of the Mount of Olives and 2 or 3 quarters of the old city of Jerusalem, maybe the whole city. I'm just telling you, the world is against Israel. That, from a Bible prophecy standpoint, we read about this in Zechariah 12. We read about it in Zechariah 14. And we know that when Jesus returns, he sort of settles up all the accounts. But until then, there's a lot of turmoil. But I'm telling you, so I'm afraid that what I think what I call the Obama administration may try to not veto a resolution. Now, this one was pretty easy to get them to veto this resolution because it didn't really make the ceasefire contingent on releasing the hostages. And 7 of the hostages, as of the third week in November, are American citizens, assuming, and they may not even be alive.
Yeah,
they're holding about 101 hostages or bodies of hostages.
Yeah.
So it's going to be. So they back in at the end of the Obama administration, they did not veto a resolution. I suspect that they may do something like that. Now they're pushing to get a ceasefire in Lebanon. And Iran seems to have backed off. And I think Iran's kind of backed off because they're like, well, we don't know what Trump's going to do. They've been saying that they're going to respond to the latest Israeli attack at the end of October. But, we're sitting here a month or so later and they have not responded yet.
Interesting. Do you think they're prepping?
They could be prepping, but it's also that the Israeli attack at the end of October was a stunning military operation in terms of its tactics, its success, and that type of thing. So what they were able to do was essentially destroy the air defense systems of Syria, Iraq, and Iran, and also cause massive damage to a secret Iranian nuclear facility at Part 10. And the facility at Part 10, by the way, it was interesting because the Biden administration said, don't you dare attack any of their nuclear installations. But then they went after one that everybody agreed was a secret installation. And so the Iranians can't come out and say, hey, they attacked our nuclear installation because they're confirming that it was a nuclear installation when they denied it. And the Biden administration can't do anything because they can't come out and say, hey, wait a minute, you did get a secret nuclear installation. So I will say that the attacks that Israel has done since September, remember they talked with the, the Operation Beeper, and then they got the beepers to explode. And the next day when they were having funerals and everything, then the pagers exploded. So they went to walkie-talkies and the walkie-talkies exploded. So
that's brilliant. So John, in just 2 minutes now, before we take just a very brief pause, what do you think the left is learning, or do you think they're in denial regarding the overwhelming positive response to the re-electing President Trump? It does, like, if you listen to The View and the typical outlets of the leftists, Marxists, socialists, they're not getting it. They refuse to. In fact, they want to double down. What is your take on overall the left and how they are seeing? There's very few voices, it seems, that are speaking in a way like, okay, well, they did win fair and square, and this is more the majority want those policies. Very few are saying that. Go ahead.
It was a pretty stunning and broad victory that President Trump and the Republicans had. Congress is still very closely divided, both the House and the Senate. A lot of work was done by Republicans in advance of the election to take care of potential areas of fraud. And even when it happened, they got a Supreme Court decision in Pennsylvania, and a couple of the election boards came out and said, well, we don't care what the Supreme Court says. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court came out and in all caps, bold italic said, you will obey our prior order and not count those ballots because they're not valid.
Jeez.
And so there's a new Republican senator from the state of Pennsylvania. So listen, a lot of people are melting down. A lot of people are changing. Even Morning Joe, which some people from MSNBC which they're now calling Morning Joe, Mourning, Morning Joe. But even Joe and Mika went down and had a meeting with Trump. And now everybody on the left's upset with them. And of course, we know there's these women that are, I don't know, they're dyeing their hair, they're shaving their heads, and they're saying, we won't marry you, or we won't have your baby, or anything like that. And my reaction is, thanks for identifying yourself so nobody wastes time with you. I don't think we're interested in you anyway.
Exactly.
Because it's they're the melting down and the crying and all of this stuff is pretty apparent. But you're seeing a lot of people in Washington, D.C., given what they did with lawfare and everything, that are a little bit nervous. Now, a lot of Republicans say we don't want to do anything with vengeance, but I don't think you act with vengeance. You act to train people not to do this if you ever get power again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're going to see a lot of prosecutions, whether the attorney general is Matt Gaetz or somebody else. I'm just telling you, I think the advice in Washington, D.C. is lawyer up. Now, that doesn't mean, by the way, you lawyer up whether you're guilty or innocent, because going through the criminal process is a minefield, and you do need a lawyer to help guide you.
Yep.
But there's going to be some prosecutions come out of this. I mean, and like the cases against Trump, even his conviction where he was convicted in New York State, they're talking about, well, let's put that on hold for 4 years. They actually said that the other day because they're on the verge of the Court of Appeals. They're dismissing that case and sanctioning the prosecutors for bringing such a ridiculous case in the first instance.
Mm-hmm.
It was a legal joke.
Yep.
What they tried to do. And the Court of Appeals judges at the hearing, they said that. And by the end of the hearing, the prosecutors were not defending what they did. They were asking the Court of Appeals, please don't sanction us when you dismiss this case.
So we got to take a brief pause. When we come back, I'm going to just give people the subtitle of this article we're going to go to at Foreign Affairs. And it is Technology is Remaking War and America Must Adapt. More with John Haller coming up on Worldview Matters.
Introducing Patriot Mobile, the wireless carrier that stands with you. We are committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream.
Get free activation now with promo code DAVID. Hey friends, we're running our biannual campaign to ask for donations, and we appreciate your generosity, most importantly your prayers, but we do raise support for the next 6 months to keep Worldview Matters going strong, and then we get to purchase airtime on other networks and spread the message and get it out there. So for those able to contribute a one-time gift of $200 or more, or a recurring gift of $25 a month, we'd love to send you a commemorative pen. It's a rose gold pen set branded with Worldview Matters on the pen. So first-time donors, we would also like to send you our mug. That's right, etched with my trademark, Keep Speaking the Truth About Things That Matter. So go to worldviewmatters.tv and make your tax-deductible gift during this time when we're doing our fundraiser. Back to John Haller. Okay, John, the battle of precise mass. What does that mean, and why is technology so important now? Is it just the fact that there's not as many deaths of human beings? They're limiting collateral damage of strikes. Is technology that important? Just walk us through this briefly.
Wow, there's a series of articles in the most recent issue of Foreign Affairs called World of War. And I talked about some of them in my update on Sunday, November 17th. And I will be in the future because I think they're very well thought out. And these are coming from the technocrats. So what's happening in battles of precise mass is the war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, has become almost a laboratory for future warfare. And what's happening is that they're finding that a lot of systems that have been relied on before. So, the Pentagon, it's a big building. So they think we need to build big, expensive systems to do things. And what they're finding is that with drones and other technology, they can bypass a lot of these big, expensive systems. So Russia and China and a lot of other countries are developing, I think India just came out and announced something the other day, are developing hypersonic missiles. These are missiles that fly at a speed of Mach 5 or about 5 times the speed of sound, anywhere up to 10 or 11 times the speed of sound. They can also change direction. They can fly a long distance. And it's very difficult for missile systems to shut this down. Now, some people think that the technology is overhyped at present, but certainly Russia's been talking about this for 6 or 7 years, that they have hypersonic missiles. The problem with that is that one precision-directed hypersonic missile could take out a multi-billion-dollar aircraft carrier. Wow. So you might spend $3, $4, $5 million on a hypersonic missile. It can destroy whatever our aircraft carriers cost, $50 billion or whatever, and they can be gone. And so that makes it difficult. The other advantage is that they're unmanned systems in a lot of cases, so you can fly at faster speeds. So, for example, we've all seen the Top Gun movies. You know, the human body can only stand so many G-forces, precision turns, and you pass out. But if you can make that a pilot, an aircraft without a pilot, you can do things. So what they're finding, though, is that these drones can be mass produced. Even Ukraine announced last year, in the midst of a war, the country is devastated. They were going to be able to produce, they thought, 1 million drones in Ukraine in 1 year. So now we've seen these things, and you see these drone arrays like at New Year's celebrations and that type of thing. China just did, I think they set a record where they simultaneously launched and controlled 8,500 drones.
Gosh.
Well, multiply that by 1,000 because of the way computing power is increasing. You might soon be able to control 1 million to 8 million drones at one time. That makes it difficult to defend against. And so that's why they're talking about battles of precise mass.
Okay.
Drones are small, fast, can be piloted from afar. Some of them have their own built-in artificial intelligence systems to do the programming of how they're going to go. They don't even really need to be in communication with a base station. And so these drones are able to go in and take out people and installations. And so now, Ukraine was putting up videos of drones that they had that were able to essentially drop molten metal on tanks and destroy tanks. So you can get a $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 drone can take out a $30 million battle tank.
Wow.
And so this is changing. But the other problem is that it makes this type of warfare accessible to more countries because of the cost of scaling up. So United States has a thing, I think Britt Gillette, my friend Britt Gillette, who I've done some roundtables with, has talked about molecular manufacturing, where they manufacture these things at a molecular level very quickly. They can be controlled. There's the kind of famous movie that had, the drones, a small swarm of drones, like a swarm of bees circling a guy, and they all had a bullet or some kind of package that could explode and take a guy out. And right now, there's really not a lot of defense. So that's why a country like when Israel gets in a battle with Hezbollah in Lebanon, they have a lot of missiles and rockets, and Israel has Iron Dome. They have Arrow 3 missiles. They have, aircraft that can take out things. But sometimes these drones get through and they fly around the country for like 2 or 3 hours.
Wow.
Because they fly low to the ground. They're hard to find. And I have friends in Ukraine, and they tell me that, these Shahed drones that they get from Iran, they come in with, they sound like lawnmowers. They have a very simple gas engine on, but it's the sound of a swarm of those. So they might take out 90% of them, but 10% get through, and they don't cost that much. They cost like, I don't know, 5 or 10 grand at most to build and put together. So Iran can scale up very quickly. Other countries can scale up. And then when you add in the computing power and artificial intelligence and all of this, so what this article on Foreign Affairs is saying, Battles of Precise Mass, is that, listen, this is changing warfare, and the United States needs to adapt. So you may not need a huge air force or a huge naval fleet or anything like that. But the problem is everybody else is going to be able to do that too. So the world of war is changing very quickly. And
Wow.
I mean, Israel's dealing with it with Iran. And because Iran is in one of the other articles in the Foreign Affairs was about, it's called The Age of Depopulation, that Iran is in demographic collapse, as are most of the countries in the West. Japan will lose 2 million people in population this year. Last year, they lost 1 million. China will probably lose 6 million in population this year. That's 1.5 times the city of Los Angeles.
Wow.
It's just gone from your population. And so Iran has been told and has said in their own newspapers, they've had the fastest collapse in female fertility of any country in human history. So that makes them more likely to try to go to these technologies, to try to use these technologies, and maybe to use them now. That's why I kind of think a lot of these things are converging to see a wrap up of these things in Bible prophecy in the very near future.
It changes everything. It changes war, it changes fatalities, it changes how much money is spent. You're right. Other countries get involved. John, it goes by way too fast. We're going to have you on more often, and we're talking about possibly doing a live with Mr. John Haller. Brother, I really appreciate all the research you do. And you even read the New York Times, so the rest of us don't have to.
I do it so you don't have to. That's right.
Thank you, brother, so
Thank you,
much.
David.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, guys. And again, thanks for your prayers and for your ongoing support of Worldview Matters. Keep it coming. To God be the glory. Thanks for tuning in and for sharing the podcast. God bless you. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.